It's likely either you or somebody you know has heard the words diagnosed with breast cancer. It affects a whole lot of people. So being that October is National Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we wanted to bring you some special stories here tonight, in particular one woman's journey and how breast cancer turned her life upside down. But somewhere along the way, she found a new career and a new passion. Plus, where to turn for help after a diagnosis and beyond. So let's get started. We've got a lot of information coming up as we focus on breast cancer as tonight's topic of our Issues Tampa Bay. Hi there, I'm your host, Jen Holloway. My first guest is someone who's been affected, fought the battle, and won. But along the way, her life changed in ways she never, ever expected. Angelique Newman, welcome to the show. We're glad you're here.
Thank you so much.
I'm guessing your story started with a diagnosis or a lump?
It started with a lump that I found myself. I like to say I'm probably one of the only people who can say tanning saved my life.
Really?
I was tanning and got home and was bathing and putting on lotion. And that was when I found it on December 30th, 2011.
And you are how old?
I was 34.
34?
Yes.
That's young for breast cancer.
It was. It actually made it a little more challenging for me to get the attention of my physicians. You know, when I found it, they assured me.
Because you had not even had a mammogram at that time.
That's correct.
Wow.
That's correct. So yeah, it was very difficult to convince them. And in fact, when my OBGYN wrote the script for the mammogram for diagnostic purposes, he only wrote a script for one side, which was exceptionally odd. And so, yeah, they were that certain that it was nothing. So even when I went for the biopsy, the surgical oncologist said, "I've seen your films. I think you're just worried over nothing, but I'll do the biopsy to make you feel better."
Oh my stars.
And while he was
that must have blown you away.
Yeah, while he was in doing the biopsy, he did warn me that it looked a little worse than he had originally expected, but he said he wasn't saying I had cancer, that would come about a week later. And I found that bad news spreads much faster than good news. And I got a call 2 days later on January 18th of 2012 that I had invasive breast cancer.
And what did you go through?
I had 6 surgeries and 4 months of chemo over an 11-month time span. The first of the 6 surgeries was double radical mastectomies. And I don't know about you, but I always assumed that that would be kind of a worst case scenario, kind of the last segment to a treatment. And for me, it was the starting point, and it changed my life.
Wow. 34, that's just, I'm thinking of what I was like at 34, and I just think how traumatic that must have been for you. So you have a husband and a daughter. They were with you at the time of diagnosis. So you had a good support system.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But you also had some tragedy among your support system, which made this road even a little more difficult.
I did. About 4 months before I was diagnosed, my business mentor, who was an amazing, amazing woman, and key in how I dealt with everything that came my way. She was diagnosed with lung cancer, and she passed away probably about 5 months into my journey. And on my last chemo treatment day, it was July 3rd, 2012, we received the news that my mother-in-law had been diagnosed with lung cancer. Originally, we were told that they expected that she had 2 to 4 years to live, and amazingly to us, she passed away 8 weeks later on August 31st.
My goodness.
So, you know, in the midst of struggling through, I mean, I was bald, I was, you know, going through all these different side effects from my chemotherapy and still healing from the surgeries, because 6 surgeries, I can tell you, nobody's body was meant to be knocked out like that, much less 6 times in 1 year.
Jeez.
And it definitely was a test.
Did you know you were that strong? 10 years ago, if I would have said, Angelique, are you this tough? Could you go through all this? What would you have said?
I probably would have thrown up my hands and said, I hope so. And it's sort of the irony of the story, because almost 1 year to the day of finding my tumor, I sat down at a girls' dinner with 2 of my best friends.
God bless girlfriends.
Oh, yes. I sat down and I told them that my biggest fear was getting cancer. And it was a year later that I found it. So I've come
That was
to,
a year prior to your diagnosis. You
It
had no
was.
idea.
No idea.
Does it run in your family?
It does, and that's actually one of the things that I like to make sure I speak of, because I speak on survivorship often. I love to share my story, and if it helps one person, then I feel successful.
All right.
But I had the BRCA analysis done probably 2 years before I was diagnosed, and it came back negative, which means that the gene that they tested gave the indication that I wasn't at high risk for breast or ovarian cancer.
see.
And so for me, what it did was it almost gave me a false sense of security, because even though people in my family had been diagnosed, I have a lot of cancer in my family, nobody else had been diagnosed at a young age. And so having that negative a test made me feel like it wasn't something I was going to have to worry about.
Right. Took some stress off your life.
It did for a short period of time, and now I just like to make sure that people understand that while it's important to be tested, you still have to maintain all of those other fail-safes as well.
Right. How young do you recommend people get tested?
You know, the BRCA analysis I think is a good thing, probably by the age of 24, 25, just to have the knowledge. If you'll recall, that was actually what Angelina Jolie had when she opted to go through her mastectomies. She had a positive BRCA analysis. I think testing for proactive reasons is always a good thing at any point in time, but again, I do urge people to understand that those tests are not guaranteed, and it doesn't mean that just because you're positive you will end up with it. You know, they talk about medicine being the practice of medicine, and so nothing is perfect.
Right.
So it's important that, you know, women and men alike who are tested for certain things understand it just can help you to develop a plan, I suppose.
I think you drive home an incredibly important point. It's not your age. My dad had colon cancer years ago, and prior to going into chemo, he made all of his daughters promise we'd get a colonoscopy. I was 34. Why do I need one, Dad? You're 50-something. What? No. And I was the one daughter who had polyps.
See?
Go figure.
My sister, after I was diagnosed, I immediately started on social media, and the night that I got the news, I didn't share it with anybody when I got the news. I actually had a meeting with somebody that day, and said, you know what, I've got to leave a little bit early.
So you just put it in the back of your mind. And
Yes,
sitting back
because I was
there.
concerned about people driving home and being upset. My mother worked in Tampa and lived in St. Pete.
You're so
and
sweet.
So, so I waited till we were all home, and I told my husband and my daughter. The first thing my daughter said was that she was very angry because I was the best mom in the world and I didn't deserve it. So you want to talk about like touching your heart. And then I called my parents and I told my mom that I had the results and that I had cancer. And then I got on social media and I said, please, friends, please go get your mammograms. And I cannot tell you how amazing it was to have people responding back, I'm scheduling tomorrow. I've been putting it off for 6 months. You're right, I'm going to do it. My own sister did the same thing. My older sister called me up and or sent me a message and said, I just got it on the calendar.
And that's a good feeling for you.
It
You are
is.
changing lives and doing. All right, last question before we go to break. What did you do prior to getting breast cancer as a profession?
I was in the field of behavioral profiling for employee selection and retention, and I had the best job. I got to travel around and speak about different characteristics and utilizing employees to their strengths and their fullest potential, and how to understand where their difficulties lied and proactively address them as an employer.
Yeah.
And so
but that is not what you do now, is it? No. And it's all because of breast cancer. Your life took a complete 180 turn to the left. So let's talk about that next.
Sure.
And we'll stay with us. We'll hear more of Angelique's story, and we'll tell you how she went from patient to entrepreneur. Her story next.